I pulled into my driveway after my morning walk and froze. My late wife's rocking chair sat on the lawn, her sewing box, my father's toolbox, photo albums scattered across the grass like trash. Then I saw her. My daughter-in-law, Tracy, arms crossed on my porch, smirking. "We decided to do some cleaning," she said. "Those old things are useless." My hands shook. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Then I'll clean out what's useless to me, too." It was time to show who's in charge here. The rage I felt standing there in my own driveway was something I hadn't experienced in years. Not since Margaret passed 3 years ago had anything made my blood boil quite like this. I'm 67 years old, and I've seen a lot in my lifetime. But this kind of disrespect cut deeper than any insult I'd ever received. I started walking across the lawn, bending down to pick up Margaret's things. The rocking chair where she'd nursed our son Brad. The sewing box she'd used to mend every piece of clothing we ever owned, because she believed in taking care of what you had. My father's toolbox, the one he'd given me when I bought this house 30 years ago, telling me a man needs good tools to build a good life. The Hendersons next door were standing on their porch, watching with concern written all over their faces. George Henderson and I had been neighbors for 25 years. His wife Martha put her hand over her mouth when she saw what was happening. I could see them whispering to each other, probably wondering what kind of family drama was unfolding on their quiet street. Tracy followed me around the yard like a shadow, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're too old to need all this junk, Jesse. You don't even use half of it anymore. It's just cluttering up the house." I kept my mouth shut, kept picking up pieces of my life. Then I saw it. Margaret's wedding dress, the one she'd kept wrapped in tissue paper, in a special box in the attic. It was lying in a puddle of mud near the flower bed, the delicate lace stained brown. My knees almost gave out. I picked it up carefully, feeling the wet fabric between my fingers, and something inside me broke open. "This was her wedding dress," I said quietly, turning to face Tracy. "She wore this the day we got married 42 years ago." Tracy shrugged. "It was just taking up space. Nobody's ever going to wear it again." That's when I heard the car pull up. Brad's silver sedan parked behind my truck. My son got out, wearing his sales rep uniform, navy blue polo shirt, with his company logo. He looked at the scene in front of him, at his father holding a muddy wedding dress, at his wife standing there with her arms crossed, at the belongings scattered everywhere. And he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Brad," I said, and I heard my voice crack. "Son, what is this?" Tracy moved fast, crossing the lawn, and putting her arm around Brad's waist, pressing herself against him like she was claiming territory. "Baby, your dad's upset. We talked about this, remember? About making some changes?" Brad shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. "Dad, we need to talk. Tracy and I have been discussing things, and we think maybe it's time for some changes around here." Changes. The word hung in the air between us. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and realized this wasn't spontaneous. This had been planned. They'd talked about this, plotted it out, decided together that my belongings belonged in the yard like garbage. "This is my house," I said, and my voice came out stronger than I expected. "I bought this place 30 years ago. Your mother and I raised you here. We paid off the mortgage 10 years ago. This is mine." Tracy's expression changed for just a second. The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. It was gone in a flash, but I'd seen it. She knew exactly what she was doing. "Dad?" Brad started, but Tracy squeezed his arm and he stopped. "Brad deserves to have a say in his own home," Tracy said smoothly. "He lives here too. You both moved in 2 years ago when Brad lost his apartment," I reminded them. "I opened my door because that's what family does. But this house is in my name. The deed has my name on it." Tracy smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. She walked back into my house and came out a minute later with a manila folder. She opened it right there on the lawn and started pulling out papers. "We've been keeping track," she said, shuffling through documents. "October 15th, you left the stove on for 3 hours. November 2nd, you couldn't find your car keys for 2 days. November 28th, you told us the same story about your army buddy Walter, 3 times in one evening. December 9th, You forgot you'd already had breakfast and made eggs again at 10 in the morning. Each statement felt like a punch. I stared at the papers in her hands, saw my son's handwriting on some of them, saw dates and times and descriptions of every little mistake I'd made over the past few months. "We're worried about you, Dad," Brad said, but his voice sounded hollow, like he was reading from a script Tracy had written. Tracy moved closer, her voice taking on a syrupy sweetness that made my skin crawl. "We think you need more help than we can provide here at home. There are wonderful facilities, places where trained professionals can take care of you, where you'd be safe." The words hit me like ice water. Facilities. They wanted to put me in a home, lock me away somewhere, so they could have this house to themselves, or worse. My mind raced through the possibilities. None of them good. "Get out," I said. The words came out quiet but firm. "Both of you. Pack your bags and get out of my house." Tracy actually laughed. It was a light tinkling sound that made me want to cover my ears. "Brad is your son. You wouldn't really kick him out, would you? What would people think? What would your friends at the VFW say? That you threw your own child out on the street?" She'd thought this through. Every angle, every pressure point. She was using my love for Brad, my reputation in the community, my age and my grief against me. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw how thin he'd gotten, how tired he looked. The Brad I knew, the boy who used to help his mother in the garden, and who'd cried at her funeral, was still in there somewhere. But this version standing in front of me, this man who wouldn't meet his father's eyes, I barely recognized him. I didn't trust myself to say anything else. I gathered up as many of Margaret's things as I could carry and walked into the house through the front door, past Tracy, who smirked at me, past Brad, who stared at the ground. I went straight to the master bedroom on the first floor, the one Margaret and I had shared for 30 years, and locked the door behind me. I set Margaret's things down carefully on the bed and sank down next to them. Her photo sat on my nightstand, taken at Brad's college graduation. She was smiling, so proud of our son. I picked up the frame and held it, feeling the tears come. "I don't know what to do, Maggie," I whispered to her picture. "Our boy's in trouble, and I don't know how to help him." From beyond the door, I could hear Tracy and Brad arguing in the kitchen. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the tone. Brad's voice was defensive, pleading. Tracy's was sharp, commanding. This went on for maybe 20 minutes before it got quiet. Then I heard Tracy's voice, muffled but clear enough. She was on the phone with someone. "Yes, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. He won't know what hit him." I sat up straighter, pressing my ear closer to the door. Who was she calling? What was happening at 10 o'clock tomorrow? But the conversation ended, and I heard footsteps going upstairs to the bedroom Tracy and Brad used. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Margaret's rocking chair that I'd brought back inside, holding her sewing box, and tried to figure out what Tracy was planning. The sun came up on what I knew would be a difficult day, but I had no idea just how bad it would get. I'd managed maybe 2 hours of sleep, dozing in the chair, when I heard voices downstairs. I checked my watch. 8:30 in the morning. I got up, splashed water on my face in the bathroom, and headed toward the kitchen. What I found there made my stomach drop. Tracy sat at my kitchen table like she owned it, which I suppose she thought she did. Brad was next to her, looking uncomfortable. And across from them sat a woman I'd never seen before, maybe 50 years old, wearing a gray business suit and holding a leather portfolio. 3 coffee mugs sat on the table, along with a plate of pastries that Tracy must have picked up from the bakery downtown. "Good morning, Jesse," Tracy said brightly, like we were all old friends. "This is Patricia Drummond. She's an attorney who specializes in elder care law. We thought it might be good to have a professional opinion about your situation." Patricia stood and extended her hand. I didn't take it. "What situation?" I asked. "Please, sit down," Patricia said gently, gesturing to the empty chair. "I just want to ask you a few questions. Nothing formal, just a friendly conversation." I remained standing. "I don't remember inviting you into my home. Your son and daughter-in-law are concerned," Patricia continued, her tone warm but professional. "They love you very much, and they want to make sure you're getting the care you need. Now, can you tell me what day it is today?" And there it was. A competency evaluation, right here in my own kitchen, disguised as a friendly chat. "What day is it?" I repeated. "It's Thursday, March 21st. The president is the same one it was yesterday. My address is 147, Maple Street, Greenfield, Pennsylvania. My social security number is... Actually, no. I'm not answering any more questions." Patricia's expression remained kind, but I saw her make a note in her portfolio. "I understand you're feeling defensive. That's natural, but your family is trying to help you." "Get out of my house," I said, looking at all three of them. "All of you, right now." Patricia reached into her portfolio and pulled out a document, setting it on the table in front of me. "Mr. Jesse, I want you to know that your daughter-in-law has filed a petition for emergency guardianship. There's going to be a hearing in 3 days. You have the right to legal representation." I picked up the document with shaking hands and started reading. The words swam in front of my eyes. Petitioner Tracy Jesse requests emergency guardianship of Jesse Robert Jesse, age 67, on grounds of diminished mental capacity and danger to self. The petition claimed I'd had multiple falls in the past 6 months. A lie. It said I'd left the gas stove on repeatedly, creating a fire hazard. An exaggeration of one time I'd been distracted. It claimed I'd been found wandering the neighborhood confused and disoriented. Complete fiction. "This is all lies," I said, my voice rising. "I've never fallen. I'm not wandering around confused. This is made up." "Dad," Brad finally spoke, and I turned to look at my son. "Tracy's just worried. Maybe we should listen to the experts. They know more about this stuff than we do." "The experts?" I stared at him. "Brad, do you honestly believe I'm losing my mind? Look at me. Have I ever been confused when I talk to you? Have I forgotten who you are? Have I done anything that makes you think I can't take care of myself?" Brad looked down at his coffee mug. "You do forget things sometimes. Everyone forgets things sometimes," I shot back. "That doesn't make a person incompetent." Patricia stood up and placed her business card on the table. "The hearing is Tuesday morning at 9. You should get your own attorney, Mr. Jesse. This is a serious matter." She nodded to Tracy and Brad, picked up her portfolio, and let herself out. As soon as the door closed, I turned on Tracy. "Why are you doing this?" For a moment, the mask dropped again. That cold, calculating look came back into her eyes. "Because Brad deserves to have a real life, and this house could sell for $400,000. We have plans." The truth, finally, out in the open. This wasn't about concern for my well-being. This was about money, about taking control of my property and selling it out from under me. "This house isn't for sale," I said. "It's mine, and it's going to stay mine." Tracy smiled, and it was the most chilling thing I'd ever seen. "Not if a judge declares you incompetent. Then Brad, as your only child, becomes your guardian, and we make the decisions. We decide where you live, what happens to your property, everything. The law is very clear about that." She'd researched this, planned it, knew exactly what steps to take to steal my life from me. I looked at Brad, saw the guilt written all over his face, and realized my son had either been completely fooled or was willingly going along with this scheme. Either way, I was in trouble. After they left the kitchen, I stood there for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. Then I remembered Walter, my old friend from Vietnam, the guy I'd served with in the Mekong Delta back in '69 and '70. We'd stayed close all these years, and I knew he had a daughter who was a lawyer. I found my phone and called him. "Walt, it's Jesse. I need help." 20 minutes later, I was driving downtown to a small law office above Ruby's Diner on 3rd Street. The sign on the door read Hughes and Associates, attorney at law. I climbed the narrow stairs and found myself in a modest reception area with outdated magazines and a secretary who looked about 20 years old. "I'm here to see Caroline Hughes," I said. "Walter Hughes sent me." The young woman smiled. "Of course." Dad called. "Go right in." Caroline Hughes was nothing like the slick, professional Patricia Drummond. She was maybe late 30s, wearing jeans and a sweater, with her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her office was cluttered with files and law books, and she had a half-eaten sandwich on her desk. "Mr. Jesse," she said, standing to shake my hand. "Dad told me what's happening. Sit down and tell me everything." So I did. I told her about Tracy throwing my things in the yard, about the competency evaluation that morning, about the petition for guardianship. I showed her the documents Patricia had left. Caroline listened carefully, taking notes, asking questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. I'm going to be honest with you. These cases are really hard. If they have documentation, even false documentation, and if your son testifies against you, judges often err on the side of caution. They'd rather protect someone who might not need protection than risk leaving someone vulnerable in a dangerous situation. My heart sank. So I'm going to lose? I didn't say that, Caroline replied. But we need to build a strong case. We need evidence that their claims are false, and we need to show that their motivations aren't pure. Can you think of anything that might help? Anything unusual about Tracy's background or behavior? I thought about it. She's only been in Brad's life for 3 years. They got married fast, maybe 6 months after they met. Before that, I don't know much about her life. Caroline made a note. I'll do some digging. In the meantime, document everything. Write down every interaction, every conversation. Keep a journal of your daily activities to show you're lucid and capable. And whatever you do, don't give them any ammunition. No forgetting things, no leaving the stove on, nothing they can use against you. I agreed to everything, and left her office feeling slightly better but still terrified. When I got home, it was early afternoon. I parked on the street and walked up to my front door, reaching for my keys. The key wouldn't turn in the lock. I tried again, jiggling it, thinking maybe something was stuck. But no, the lock had been changed. I was locked out of my own house. I knocked on the door. Hard. After a minute, Tracy appeared on the other side, visible through the window next to the door. She didn't open it. For your own safety, Dad, she called through the glass, her voice muffled. We can't have you wandering in and out at all hours. Brad will bring your things to the guest house out back. You'll be more comfortable there. The guest house. The converted garage apartment at the back of the property. The place where we used to store old furniture and boxes. She was banishing me to the guest house on my own property. I stood there on my porch, the porch I'd built with my own hands 30 years ago, locked out of my own home, and felt more helpless than I'd ever felt in my life. The guest house was cold, and smelled like dust, and forgotten things. It was maybe 400 square feet, just one room with a tiny bathroom, and a kitchenette that consisted of a mini fridge, a microwave, and a hot plate. Brad brought some of my clothes, my toiletries, and a few personal items in cardboard boxes, setting them just inside the door, without saying a word to me. Brad? I tried, but he just shook his head and walked away, back to the main house, back to Tracy. I spent that afternoon trying to make the space livable. I found some old blankets in one of the storage boxes, and made up the narrow bed that was pushed against one wall. The heater worked, thankfully, but it rattled and clanked and barely put out enough warmth. I had no television, no computer, except for my old laptop that took 5 minutes to boot up. I felt like a prisoner in my own backyard. That evening, Tracy brought dinner on a tray. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans. She set it on the small table near the kitchenette and smiled at me. I made your favorite, she said. Eat up. You need to keep your strength up. After she left, I stared at the food. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I was hungry, though, so I ate. Within an hour, I started feeling strange. Foggy, like my thoughts were moving through syrup. I tried to read a book but couldn't focus on the words. I felt disoriented, confused about what time it was. I went to bed early, slept hard, and woke up the next morning, feeling hungover. The pattern continued. Tracy brought breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Each time I ate, I felt increasingly out of it. By the third day, I caught myself starting to say something and forgetting mid-sentence what I'd been talking about. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the confused, tired man staring back at me. Was I actually losing my mind? Were they right about me? That afternoon, a stray cat that sometimes hung around the property came by. Orange tabby, skinny, always hungry. I'd been feeding him scraps for months. He meowed at my door, and on impulse, I gave him most of the meatloaf Tracy had brought for lunch. I sat on the step outside the guest house and watched the cat eat. He seemed fine at first, gobbling down the food. But about an hour later, I noticed him moving strangely, stumbling a little as he walked. He found a spot in the sun and lay down, barely moving, his eyes half closed. That's when it hit me. The food. She was drugging the food. My head cleared like someone had turned on a light. Of course. That's why I felt foggy and confused. That's why I was forgetting things. Tracy was systematically poisoning me to create evidence of incompetence for the hearing. I stopped eating anything Tracy brought me. I had some old granola bars in one of the storage boxes and a jar of peanut butter. I made do with that and water from the tap. Within 24 hours, my head was completely clear. The fog lifted. I could think straight again, and I was furious. I called Caroline and told her what I'd figured out. "That's serious," she said. "That's assault, potentially attempted murder. But we need proof. Can you save some of the food? Get it tested?" I told her I'd try. The next meal Tracy brought, I scraped half of it into a plastic container and hid it in the mini fridge. Then I dumped the rest down the toilet. But I knew food evidence alone wasn't enough. Caroline was right when she said we needed to prove intent and pattern. I needed to know more about Tracy. Who was she really? Where did she come from? I opened my laptop and started searching. It took a while because the internet connection was weak out in the guest house, but I was determined. I typed in Tracy's full name. Tracy Marie Jesse. Nothing useful came up, just some social media profiles that told me nothing. Then I remembered Brad had mentioned once that Tracy's maiden name was Sutherland. I tried Tracy Sutherland and got more results. There were a lot of Tracy Sutherlands in America, but I started going through them one by one. On the third page of results, I found an obituary from 8 years ago in Toledo, Ohio. Martha Sutherland, beloved aunt and retired school teacher, passed away peacefully at her home with family at her side, survived by her devoted niece Tracy Sutherland, who cared for her in her final years. Something about that obituary felt off. I kept digging and found a follow-up article in the Toledo Blade from about 6 months after Martha's death. The headline read, "Family Disputes Will of Martha Sutherland Claims Undue Influence." I read the whole article, my hands shaking. Martha's nephews and other relatives had contested the will, claiming that Tracy had isolated Martha from the rest of the family, manipulated her, and convinced her to leave everything to Tracy alone. The case had been settled out of court. No charges were filed, but the family's attorney was quoted as saying, "This is a clear case of elder abuse and financial exploitation." I kept searching. Found more. Tracy had been married before Brad. A man named Derek Paulson, also in Ohio. They'd been married for 2 years. Divorced 5 years ago. I found Derek's father's obituary. Kenneth Paulson, survived by his son Derek and daughter-in-law Tracy. But when I searched for Kenneth's will, I found another news article. Derek had been cut out of his father's will entirely. Everything went to a trust that Tracy had helped Kenneth set up shortly before his death. Derek had contested it, but the will stood. He'd gotten nothing from his own father. The pattern was clear. Tracy targeted men with elderly parents or relatives who had property or money. She married the men, worked her way into the elderly relatives' confidence, isolated them, manipulated them, and then took everything. She'd done it at least twice before. Brad and I were just her latest victims. I printed everything I could find, even though it used up most of the ink in my old printer. I compiled it all into a folder, and late that night, I drove to Caroline's office. She was still there, working by lamplight. "Look at this," I said, spreading the documents across her desk. Caroline read through everything, her eyes getting wider. "This changes everything. She's a serial predator. She's done this before, multiple times. But will it be enough?" I asked. "It might be," Caroline said, "but we have to be careful. If she realizes you know about her past, she might accelerate whatever she's planning. The hearing is in 2 days. We need to make it to that hearing with this evidence intact." I drove back home, if you could still call it home, feeling like maybe, just maybe, I had a chance. But when I turned onto my street, I saw flashing lights in front of my house. An ambulance, police cars, neighbors standing on their lawns, watching. I pulled over fast and ran toward the house. The paramedics were bringing someone out on a stretcher. It was Brad. He was unconscious, his face pale, an oxygen mask over his nose and mouth. Tracy stood on the porch, crying dramatically, mascara running down her face. When she saw me, her expression changed. Her eyes went hard, and she pointed at me. "You did this," she screamed. "You put something in his food. He's been trying to tell me you were acting crazy, and now look what you've done." The police officers, a young guy named Martinez and an older woman named Thompson, approached me immediately. "Sir, are you Jesse Robert Jesse?" Officer Martinez asked. "I am. What happened to my son?" "Your daughter-in-law says he collapsed after eating dinner. She found him unconscious in the bathroom. We need you to come down to the station and answer some questions." My mind raced. Tracy had poisoned Brad. She'd used the same drugs she'd been giving me. But she'd given Brad enough to make him seriously ill, and now she was blaming me. It was brilliant and terrifying. If I got arrested, I'd miss the hearing. If I missed the hearing, the guardianship petition would go through unopposed. She'd win everything. "I didn't do anything to my son," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I'll come with you. I want to help however I can." Officer Thompson nodded. "You're not under arrest. We just need a statement." At the police station, they put me in an interview room. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, a table, and 3 chairs. I sat there for 20 minutes before a detective came in. She was maybe late 40s, with short graying hair and tired eyes. "Mr. Jesse, I'm Detective Sarah Brennan. I understand this has been a difficult evening. Can you tell me what happened?" I took a breath and decided to tell her everything. Every single thing. The belongings in the yard, the guardianship petition, Tracy's history, the drugged food, all of it. I talked for maybe 45 minutes straight while she took notes and occasionally asked clarifying questions. When I finished, Sarah leaned back in her chair and studied me. "That's quite a story. It's the truth. I believe parts of it might be," she said carefully. "The guardianship hearing is Tuesday morning. This accusation against you happens Thursday night, 3 days before that hearing. The timing is convenient for your daughter-in-law." Hope flickered in my chest. "You believe me?" "I believe this situation deserves investigation," Sarah replied. "If your son was drugged, the hospital will find it in his blood work. That would support your theory. And if you saved some of that food you mentioned, we can test it too." I gave her the plastic container I'd hidden in the guest house. She logged it as evidence and told me I could go but not to contact Tracy or Brad directly. When I got back to the guest house, it was almost midnight. I was exhausted, terrified, and felt more alone than I had since Margaret died. I lay on that narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering if I was going to lose everything. Morning came too fast, the day of the hearing. Caroline picked me up at 8, and we drove to the courthouse together. She dressed professionally today, in a suit and heels, her hair pulled back. "The detective called me this morning," Caroline said as we drove. "They found benzodiazepines and antihistamines in Brad's system. High doses. No prescription on file. Brad told the hospital he never took those medications, so they know he was drugged." "Yes, but we still have to get through this hearing. Tracy's attorney will argue that the drugging is separate from the guardianship issue. We need to connect everything together." The courthouse was an old building downtown, built sometime in the 1930s, with marble floors and high ceilings. We went through security and found the right courtroom. Tracy was already there with Patricia Drummond, and Brad was there too, in a wheelchair, looking weak and pale but conscious. My heart broke seeing him like that. My son, my only child, reduced to this because of a woman's greed. The bailiff called the courtroom to order, and Judge Ronald Henderson entered. He was maybe 70, with white hair and a stern expression. He sat at the bench and reviewed the papers in front of him. "This is a petition for emergency guardianship," Judge Henderson said. "Tracy Jesse, represented by Patricia Drummond, is petitioning for guardianship of Jesse Robert Jesse, Mr. Jesse. You're represented by Caroline Hughes. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Caroline said. "Let's proceed." Miss Drummond? Patricia stood and began her presentation. She called it a presentation, but it felt like an execution. She laid out all the documentation Tracy had compiled. The alleged falls, the confusion, the repeated stories, the stove incidents. She painted a picture of a man in serious cognitive decline who posed a danger to himself and possibly others. Then she called Brad to testify. The bailiff wheeled Brad to the witness stand. He was sworn in, his voice weak. Patricia asked him questions, and Brad answered them. Yes, he'd noticed his father forgetting things. Yes, he was worried. Yes, he thought maybe his father needed more help than they could provide at home. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and tell him to wake up, to see what Tracy was doing. But I sat there silently, my hands clenched in my lap. Then Tracy testified. She cried real tears, talking about how heartbreaking it was to watch me decline. She mentioned finding Brad unconscious, implied without directly stating that I might have been responsible. Your Honor, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I love my father-in-law. I just want him to be safe and cared for. That's all any of us want. Judge Henderson looked sympathetic. I felt the ground disappearing beneath me. Then it was our turn. Caroline called me to the stand. I swore to tell the truth and sat down, looking out at the courtroom. George and Martha Henderson were there, sitting in the back. I hadn't even known they'd come. Caroline asked me questions. I answered clearly and directly. I explained that I was fully capable of caring for myself. I talked about my daily routines, my activities, my friendships. I denied all the claims Tracy had made. Then Caroline asked about Tracy's past. Patricia objected immediately. Your Honor, the petitioner's personal history is not relevant to Mr. Jesse's mental capacity. I disagree, Caroline said. It goes to motive, Your Honor. May I proceed? Judge Henderson thought about it. You may continue, but be brief. Caroline asked me about Martha Sutherland. I told the court what I'd found. Patricia objected again, claiming hearsay and irrelevance. Judge Henderson sustained the objection. Miss Hughes, unless you have actual evidence connecting these past incidents to the current case, I can't allow this line of questioning. Caroline tried to introduce the articles I'd found, but the judge ruled they weren't relevant without expert testimony or direct proof of wrongdoing. We were losing ground. I could see it in Caroline's face. Your Honor, Caroline said, I request a continuance. We're waiting on toxicology reports that will show Mr. Jesse was being drugged by the petitioner. We need time to compile this evidence. Patricia stood quickly. Your Honor, every day this man remains unsupervised is a risk. We've already seen what happened to his son. We can't wait. Judge Henderson looked troubled. He shuffled the papers in front of him, and I knew he was about to rule against us. Then Caroline's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and her whole face changed. Your Honor, I request a 5-minute recess. Granted. We stepped outside the courtroom. Caroline showed me a text from Detective Sarah Brennan. It read, Hospital tox screen positive. Benzodiazepines and antihistamines in high doses. No prescription on file for patient. Patient claims he never took these medications. Food sample from Mr. Jesse's residence also tested positive for same drugs. This is it, Caroline said. This proves everything. We went back into the courtroom. Caroline requested to present new evidence. Judge Henderson looked curious now, leaning forward. But before he could respond, Tracy stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Your Honor, she said, her voice shaking, I need to withdraw our petition. I think we've all been under too much stress. Perhaps family counseling would be better than legal action. The courtroom went silent. Judge Henderson frowned. Miss Jessie, this is a serious matter. You can't simply withdraw a guardianship petition like it's a request for a parking pass. Caroline jumped in. Your Honor, this isn't a civil dispute that can be withdrawn. Serious allegations have been made, and evidence of a crime has emerged. The courtroom door opened, and Detective Sarah Brennan walked in. She nodded at Caroline and approached the bench. Your Honor, I'm Detective Sarah Brennan with the Greenfield Police Department. I have evidence relevant to this case. Judge Henderson motioned her forward. Sarah presented the toxicology findings. She explained that Brad had been poisoned and the same drugs were found in food from my residence. She stated that I had been complaining of similar symptoms and had suspected I was being drugged. Patricia Drummond looked completely blindsided. She stood and said, "Your Honor, I had no knowledge of any of this. I was retained to handle a straightforward guardianship case." Tracy tried to move toward the door, but the bailiff stepped in front of her. "Mrs. Jessie, please remain seated," Judge Henderson ordered. Caroline moved fast, presenting the full file she'd compiled. Everything about Martha Sutherland, about Derek Paulson, about the pattern of Tracy targeting elderly people for their assets. She presented testimony from George and Martha Henderson, who came forward and testified that they'd heard Tracy say she couldn't wait to get rid of me and cash in on the house. Brad, still in his wheelchair, was listening to all of this. I watched his face change as the truth came out. The confusion, the realization, the horror. He looked at Tracy with eyes that were finally seeing clearly. "Did you poison me?" he asked, his voice stronger now despite his weakness. "Did you poison my dad?" Tracy's composure shattered. The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law disappeared, replaced by someone cold and vicious. She turned on Brad with fury in her eyes. "You pathetic fool," she spat. "You were so easy. A few compliments, some new clothes, tell you that you deserve better than living in your daddy's shadow. You would have signed anything I put in front of you." The courtroom erupted. Judge Henderson banged his gavel. "Order! Mrs. Jessie, I suggest you stop talking immediately." But Tracy was beyond reason now, beyond pretense. 3 years of acting had broken open, and everything ugly underneath came pouring out. That house is worth a fortune, and he's just sitting in it, wasting it while I do all the work. I cooked and cleaned and smiled and played the perfect daughter-in-law. I earned that money. I earned that house. Patricia Drummond stood, her face pale. "Your Honor, I resign from this case immediately. I had no knowledge of any criminal activity. I was lied to and used." Detective Brennan approached Tracy with handcuffs ready. "Tracy Marie Jessie, you're under arrest for assault with intent to cause bodily harm, attempted fraud, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent." As Sarah read Tracy her rights and handcuffed her, Tracy screamed threats and obscenities. She promised she'd get out. She'd make me pay. She'd destroy Brad for betraying her. It took 2 officers to get her out of the courtroom. Brad was sobbing. Deep, racking sobs that shook his thin frame. "Dad," he said, looking at me with devastated eyes. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought I loved her. I thought she loved me. I almost lost you." I went to him, kneeling beside the wheelchair despite my old knees protesting. I put my arms around my son and held him while he cried. "You're still here," I told him. "That's what matters. You came back." Judge Henderson dismissed the guardianship petition entirely. He apologized to me, said he was sorry I'd been put through this ordeal. He ordered all documents related to the case sealed and expunged from the record. Outside the courthouse, the spring sunshine felt like a blessing. Caroline stood with us, smiling with relief and satisfaction. "Detective Brennan told me Tracy will likely face 5 to 10 years, Caroline said, "and there will be restitution for your losses." Brad could walk, though he was unsteady. The drugs were leaving his system, but it would take time. I helped him to my truck, supporting his weight. "Where am I going to live?" Brad asked quietly. We'd already given up our apartment. We were living in your house. I didn't hesitate. "You're coming home, son. Where you belong." We drove back to the house together, Brad in the passenger seat, neither of us saying much. So much had happened, so much had been broken, but we were together. That was a start. When we pulled up to the house, I noticed immediately that something was wrong. The front door was open, hanging on its hinges. Brad saw it too. "Stay here," I told him, but he shook his head. "I'm coming with you." We walked into the house together and found devastation. The living room had been ransacked. The television was gone. Drawers were pulled out and emptied on the floor. Cushions were slashed open. We moved through the house, finding the same destruction in every room. In my bedroom, the safe I kept in the closet was open. The door had been pried off with professional tools. Inside was empty. Margaret's jewelry was gone. The engagement ring and wedding band I'd given her, worth maybe $40,000 together. Her grandmother's pearls. The diamond earrings I'd bought for our 25th anniversary. But worse than the jewelry, the legal documents were gone. The original deed to the house, our marriage certificate, my discharge papers from the army, birth certificates. Everything important. Everything irreplaceable. Brad and I stood in the middle of the destruction, too shocked to speak at first. Then I saw the note on the kitchen table, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. It said, "You took everything from her. Now she takes everything from you. Dennis." "Dennis?" Brad said. "Tracy has a brother named Dennis. He lives in Ohio. He's been in trouble with the law before." I called Detective Brennan immediately. She arrived within 20 minutes with 2 other officers. She took the note, examined the damage, and made notes. "Tracy's not cooperating," Sarah told us. "She refused to say anything after we arrested her, except to demand her phone call. But we found texts between her and someone named Dennis Sutherland. He's her older brother. We've been trying to locate him, but he hasn't been at his last known address." "He did this," I said, gesturing at the destruction. "Before Tracy was arrested, she must have texted him to come here and take everything valuable." Sarah nodded grimly. "We'll put out an alert for him. In the meantime, document everything that's missing, for insurance purposes and for the criminal case." After she left, Brad and I started going through the house, making a list. The television, the laptop Tracy and Brad had been using, some of Margaret's jewelry, various small electronics. But the real loss was the documents. "Without the deed," Brad said, "someone could try to claim they own the house." I felt sick. This house was all I had left of the life Margaret and I built. Losing it would destroy me. Then I remembered Caroline's words at the courthouse. "The deed is on file at the county recorder's office." "Come on," I told Brad. We drove straight to the county administration building downtown. It was almost 4 in the afternoon. They closed at 4:30. We found the recorder's office on the 2nd floor and asked for a copy of the deed. The clerk, a young woman named Amanda, pulled up the records on her computer. Then her face changed. "Sir, there's an issue. A new deed was filed this morning." "What?" I leaned over the counter, trying to see the screen. Amanda showed me. Someone had filed a deed transferring ownership of my house to a company called Sutherland Properties LLC for $1. The signature on the deed looked like mine, but wasn't. It was a forgery, but a good one. "This is fraud," I said, my voice shaking. "I never signed this. I never sold my house." Amanda looked sympathetic but helpless. "I'm sorry, sir. The deed was filed legally. If it's fraudulent, you'll need to file a police report and then petition the court to reverse it." Caroline arrived at the county building as we were leaving. Brad had called her on the way. She examined the forged deed and swore under her breath. "This is sophisticated," she said. "Whoever Dennis is, he knows what he's doing. He must have copies of your signature from documents at the house. He forged this and filed it immediately, before we could stop him." "Can we fix this?" I asked. "Yes, but it will take time. We need to prove fraud, get a court order reversing the transfer. It could take weeks." I felt defeat settling over me like a heavy blanket. We drove back to the house in silence. Brad sat beside me, his guilt and shame radiating off him in waves. "I brought her into our lives," he finally said. "This is all my fault. Son, you were fooled by someone very practiced at fooling people. This isn't on you." "Yes, it is. Mom's jewelry, her things, all of it gone because I was stupid enough to fall for her act." We sat in the driveway for a while, neither of us wanting to go back into that violated space. Then I remembered something Margaret had said to me years ago. We'd been going through a rough financial patch, worried about medical bills and the mortgage. She'd told me, "The things that matter can't be taken by thieves. Our memories, our love, that's still here." "Your mother used to say something," I told Brad, and I repeated Margaret's words. Brad wiped his eyes. "I miss her." "So do I. Every single day." We sat there a while longer. Then I had a thought, a memory of something Margaret had done without telling me, something I'd discovered only after she died. She'd been worried about identity theft and had made copies of all our important documents. She'd hidden them somewhere safe. "Come on," I said, getting out of the truck. Brad followed me into the house and down to the basement. The space was cluttered with years of accumulated stuff. Old furniture, boxes of Christmas decorations, tools, paint cans. I went to the far corner, where the old water heater Saturday. Behind the water heater, hidden in a gap between it and the wall, was a sealed plastic bag. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were copies of our original will, the deed to the house, insurance papers, birth certificates, and a letter in Margaret's handwriting. "My dearest Jessie," the letter read, "if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I made these copies because I always worried about fire or flood or someone trying to take what's ours. This house is your legacy. It's where we raised our son. Don't let anyone take it from you. I love you always. Margaret." I held the letter with shaking hands, tears streaming down my face. Even gone 3 years, she was still protecting us. "Dad," Brad said softly, "Mom saved us." We brought the documents to Caroline that evening. She examined them carefully and confirmed they were legal copies with Margaret's signature and proper notarization. "These are perfect," she said. "Combined with the county records showing continuous ownership and tax payments, we can prove the fraud. I'll file emergency motions first thing tomorrow morning." The next day, things moved fast. Police tracked Dennis Sutherland to a cheap motel 2 towns over. He'd been planning to flee the state but hadn't moved fast enough. When they arrested him, he had most of the stolen items in his motel room, including Margaret's jewelry. He hadn't sold anything yet, probably waiting for the heat to die down. Dennis made a deal with the prosecutor almost immediately. He testified that Tracy had planned everything months in advance, that she'd been coaching him on exactly what to do, that the whole scheme had been her idea. In exchange for his cooperation, his sentence would be reduced. Tracy's charges piled up: conspiracy to commit fraud, grand larceny, forgery, assault with intent to cause bodily harm, elder abuse. Her attorney told her she was looking at 8 to 12 years in prison. A week after the hearing, most of Margaret's belongings were returned to us. Her wedding rings, her jewelry, the documents, the house deed was corrected in the county records. Everything was legally secure again. But one afternoon I received a letter in the mail. It was from the county jail, from Tracy. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. "You may have won this battle, old man," she'd written in neat, controlled handwriting. "But I'll be out eventually. 8 years, maybe less with good behavior, and I never forget. You and your pathetic son better watch your backs." I showed the letter to Brad. He went pale reading it. "We should take this to the police," he said. "She's threatening us." But I just filed it away in a drawer. "She can't hurt us anymore, son. Fear is what she trades in. I'm not buying." 6 months passed. Spring turned to summer, and the wounds started to heal. Tracy was sentenced to 8 years in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 5. Dennis got 3 years for his cooperation. The house was legally ours again, fully secured with all the proper documentation filed and recorded. Insurance covered most of the damage to the property and replaced the television and other stolen items. Brad moved back into his old bedroom upstairs, the one he'd grown up in, with the same faded blue wallpaper Margaret had picked out when he was 12. At first, he didn't want to. He said he didn't deserve to be in the house, that he should find his own place. But I insisted. We'd lost enough time. We needed to rebuild what Tracy had nearly destroyed. He started seeing a therapist, Dr. Linda Morrison, twice a week. She helped him work through the manipulation, the betrayal, the guilt. It wasn't easy. There were days he could barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by what had happened and his part in it. But slowly, week by week, I saw my son coming back to himself. We worked on the house together, fixed the slashed cushions, repainted the walls where Tracy had left marks, replaced the broken door. It became a kind of therapy for both of us, taking something damaged and making it whole again. I recovered Margaret's belongings from evidence storage. We cleaned everything carefully and put things back where they belonged. The rocking chair returned to the living room by the window. The sewing box went back on the shelf in the closet. I had Margaret's wedding dress professionally cleaned and restored, then placed it back in its special box in the attic. Brad built a display case for some of our most precious items. My father's tools, arranged neatly behind glass. Margaret's wedding dress, visible but protected. Photo albums from our life together, the pages carefully restored where Tracy had damaged them. I started going to the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall more often, reconnecting with old friends I'd neglected in my grief after Margaret died. Walter was there most days, and we'd play cards and tell old stories about our time in Vietnam. George Henderson from next door joined us sometimes, and we became a regular fixture at the Tuesday afternoon poker games. But I didn't just reconnect with old friends. I started something new. At the senior center downtown, I began giving talks about financial abuse and elder exploitation. I told my story, or a version of it, warning other older folks about the signs to watch for. People like Tracy exist everywhere, I told them. They're charming, they're patient, and they know exactly how to find and exploit vulnerabilities. The senior center asked me to come back monthly. Then the library invited me to speak. Then a local church. Word spread, and I found myself becoming something of a community advocate. I helped other families recognize warning signs, connected people with lawyers and social services, and generally tried to make sure what happened to me didn't happen to anyone else. Brad started dating again in late summer. Her name was Stephanie Cole, and she worked at the public library. They met when Brad went to check out some books on recovering from manipulative relationships. She'd recommended a few titles. They'd started talking, and one thing led to another. The first time he brought her to the house, I was nervous. After Tracy, the thought of Brad with any woman made me anxious. But Stephanie was nothing like Tracy. She was warm and genuine, with an easy laugh and kind eyes. She asked about Margaret, looked at our photos with real interest, and didn't try too hard to impress me. She was just herself. She came for dinner once a week after that. Brad would cook, attempting recipes Margaret used to make, sometimes succeeding, and sometimes creating disasters that we laughed about. Stephanie fit into our lives naturally, like a puzzle piece that had always belonged there. One September afternoon, Brad and I were working in the garden. Margaret had loved roses, and we were planting new bushes to replace some old ones that had died. The sun was warm, and the work was satisfying in that simple, physical way. "Dad," Brad said, not looking up from the hole he was digging, "I don't know how you forgave me. I sided with her against you. I doubted you when I should have believed you. I almost let her destroy everything." I stopped working and looked at my son. He was crying, tears making tracks through the dirt on his face. "You're my boy," I said simply. "You made a mistake. A big one, sure. But you came back. You saw the truth, and you came back. That's what matters." "I almost lost everything that mattered chasing something I thought I wanted," Brad said, wiping his eyes with his dirty hand and just making it worse. I handed him my bandana. "That's exactly what people like Tracy count on. They find the crack in your heart and pry it open with a crowbar. They make you think you want something you don't actually need. But we're stronger now. We know what matters. We know the difference between love and manipulation." We finished planting the roses together, working in comfortable silence. When we were done, we stood back and looked at the garden. Margaret's garden, coming back to life. That evening, Stephanie came for dinner. Brad had made pot roast, and it was actually good. We ate on the back patio, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Stephanie told funny stories about library patrons, and we laughed until our sides hurt. After she left, Brad cleaned up the dishes while I sat in Margaret's rocking chair on the front porch. The chair creaked gently as I rocked, and I watched the stars come out one by one. George and Martha Henderson waved at me from their porch, and I waved back. Brad came out and sat on the porch steps. "I've been thinking," he said. "I want to add my name to the deed. Equal ownership. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship. That way, if anything happens to you, there's no question. This house stays in our family. No one can ever try to take it again." I smiled. "Your mother would like that. I'll call Caroline tomorrow and have her draw up the papers." We sat together in the quiet evening, father and son, in the house that had weathered so much, the house that represented every sacrifice, every dream, every moment of love that Margaret and I had built together. And now Brad and I were protecting it, together. Inside, through the window, I could see the display case Brad had built. Margaret's wedding dress, my father's tools, our photo albums, the physical remnants of a life well lived. But I knew now, in a way I hadn't fully understood before, that the real inheritance wasn't the house or the belongings. It was the love, the memories, the lessons learned through hardship. Tracy had tried to take everything. She'd nearly succeeded, but she'd failed because she'd misunderstood what was really valuable. You can steal jewelry and forge deeds and manipulate vulnerable people, but you can't steal what lives in the heart. Looking back now, I realized Tracy did me a strange kind of favor. She woke me up. After Margaret died, I'd been sleepwalking through life, just existing, going through the motions of living but not really participating. I'd sit in that rocking chair every evening, staring at nothing, replaying memories instead of making new ones. But fighting for my home, fighting for my son, fighting for my dignity and my rights, that reminded me I still had living to do. It pulled me out of my grief and back into the world. Not completely, not all at once, but enough. I learned that possessions don't make a home. People do. Love does. The connections between human beings, the shared history, the everyday moments of kindness and understanding. Those are what matter. But I also learned that standing up for yourself, protecting what's yours, that matters too. Not the things themselves necessarily, but what they represent. Love, history, family, legacy. Tracy thought she could erase all that by throwing my belongings in the yard like garbage. She thought she could manipulate my son and steal my home, and reduce my life to nothing. But she was wrong. Some things can't be thrown away. Some bonds can't be broken, even when they're bent and tested. And sometimes, when someone tries to show you who's in charge, you have to remind them that real power doesn't come from manipulation or greed or legal tricks. Real power comes from love, from integrity, from the willingness to fight for what's right even when you're scared, even when the system seems stacked against you, even when your own son won't look you in the eye. Brad and I, we're stronger now, closer than we've been since he was a boy. We know each other better, understand each other's weaknesses and strengths. We've been through fire together, and we came out on the other side, not unscathed, but intact. Together. The garden is blooming now. Margaret's roses are thriving, putting out flowers in deep red and soft pink and pure white. Every morning, I go out and check on them, pull a few weeds, make sure they have enough water. Brad often joins me, and we work side by side the way I used to work with Margaret. Stephanie is a permanent fixture in our lives now. She and Brad got engaged last month. Nothing fancy, just a simple ring and a quiet proposal in the garden. When Brad told me, I cried. Happy tears this time. Margaret would have loved Stephanie. They have the same gentle spirit, the same way of making people feel seen and valued. The wedding will be small, here at the house, in the garden, just family and close friends. George and Martha Henderson, Walter and his wife Susan, Caroline Hughes, who saved us, Detective Sarah Brennan, who believed me when she had no reason to, a handful of others who stood by us. I'll walk Stephanie down the aisle because her own father passed away years ago. Brad asked me if I'd do it, if it would be too painful given everything that happened with Tracy. But I told him I'd be honored. This is what moving forward looks like. This is what healing looks like. Tracy writes from prison sometimes. Not to me anymore, but to Brad. Letters that alternate between apology and accusation, between playing the victim and making veiled threats. Brad doesn't read them anymore. He just hands them to me, and I file them away, unread. She can't hurt us anymore. We won't give her that power. The house is legally secure now. Brad's name is on the deed next to mine, joint tenancy with right of survivorship, just like he wanted. We updated our wills, set up proper estate planning with Caroline's help, made sure everything is documented and protected. If someone tries this again, they'll find the walls are a lot higher and a lot stronger. I still go to the senior center and give my talks about elder abuse. The audiences keep growing. People are hungry for this information, desperate to protect themselves and their loved ones. I've helped maybe 20 families recognize manipulation and get help before it's too late. That feels good. That feels like I'm turning something terrible into something useful. Brad started a support group at the library for people who've been in manipulative relationships. Stephanie helped him organize it. Every Thursday evening, a dozen people gather in the library's community room and share their stories, support each other, remind each other that they're not alone. Brad leads it, and I'm so proud of him I could burst. My son has grown into a man I'm proud to know. Not just because he's my son, but because of who he's become through all this. He's stronger, wiser, more aware. He knows now what real love looks like versus what manipulation disguised as love looks like. He knows his own worth. He knows how to stand up for himself and others. And I know wherever Margaret is, she's smiling at us. She's proud of how we survived, how we fought back, how we protected the life she and I built together. We didn't just save the house. We saved our family. We saved ourselves. That's worth more than anything Tracy could have stolen. That's worth more than $400,000, or jewelry, or property, or any physical possession. The relationship between a father and son, rebuilt and strengthened through adversity. The knowledge that we can face anything together. The peace of knowing we did the right thing, stood up for what was right, and won. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in Margaret's rocking chair and talk to her picture. I tell her about Brad's engagement, about the garden, about the people I've helped. I tell her about the good days and the hard days, and I feel her presence, not in a supernatural way, but in the way you feel the presence of someone who shaped your life so fundamentally that they're part of who you are. She would tell me she's proud. She would say we did good, standing up to Tracy, fighting back, protecting what matters. She would say that's what she expected from me all along, because she always believed I was stronger than I gave myself credit for. And she'd be right. So here I am, 67 years old, sitting on my porch in the home I built with my wife, watching my son prepare for his wedding, planning to become a grandfather someday, helping other people avoid the traps we fell into. My life isn't perfect. I still miss Margaret every single day. There are scars that will never fully heal. But I'm here. I'm whole. And I'm fighting. That's all anyone can do, really. Stand up, fight for what's right, protect the people you love, and keep moving forward, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Tracy tried to show me who was in charge. But in the end, I showed her something more important. I showed her that you can't defeat someone who refuses to be defeated. You can't steal from someone who understands that the most valuable things can't be stolen. You can't break someone who knows how to put themselves back together. I'm in charge of my own life, my own home, my own future, and nobody, not Tracy, not anyone, is ever going to take that away from me again. The roses are blooming. The sun is setting. Brad is inside, probably on the phone with Stephanie. The Hendersons are on their porch. The neighborhood is quiet and peaceful. This is my life. This is what I fought for. This is what I won. And it was worth every single moment of the fight. Now I want to hear from you. Have you or someone you know ever faced a situation where a family member or close relative tried to take advantage of you? How did you handle it? What would you do if you found yourself in a situation like mine? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's going through something similar right now. If this story touched you or made you think, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and maybe get the warning they need. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. These real-life experiences, these lessons learned the hard way, they're meant to be shared. Share this video with anyone you think might benefit from hearing it. Maybe someone in your life needs to know the warning signs of financial abuse. Maybe someone needs to hear that it's possible to fight back and win. Maybe someone just needs to know they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. I hope you never have to go through what I went through. But if you do, I hope you remember that you're stronger than you think. Stand up, fight back, and protect what matters. That's what family does. That's what love means. Take care of yourselves and each other.